Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third session of the Culturally Competent Conversations for Equity and Belongingness, day 2 of the February Summit. And we have a treat for you in this session with our expert speaker for the session. And before I introduce my wonderful, lovely friend and expert on the topic, I do want to take a quick moment to let you know that if you do need a transcription enabled experience, you can go to www.facebook.com/C3EB Summit. The session is live right now and it is transcription enabled, so you'll be able to click on your closed captioning and be able to participate in the conversation. You can also leave comments from there or on the Hop-In stage. We are monitoring both stages, so please don't hesitate. And with that, it is my absolute honor and privilege and thrill again to introduce one of my dear friends and a visionary and empath coach and CEO of Be Intentional, Ber-Henda Williams. Ber-Henda helps empaths hone their gift, own their voice, and support themselves through growing businesses that are aligned with their soul's purpose and calling. Williams works with for-profit and not-for-profit organizations to implement processes that solve social and cultural issues. In her words, and I quote, "Together we break generational bondages and provide agency for the marginalized," end quote. And with that, it is my absolute honor to bring Ber-Henda back to the C3EB platform. Ber-Henda, thank you so much for being here, and the stage is all yours.
Oh my goodness, AJ, thank you so much. So happy to be here. And I am thrilled that you join us this is you are. So I want to talk about empathic leadership and how that shows up. So I think we need to just maybe go back just previous paradigm that existed. The paradigm that existed when the world stopped. And I would say here in Detroit, the world stopped on March 13th, 2020. And that's when we had to shelter in place. And we had to go within. We had to quarantine ourselves. And with that quarantine moment, I don't think any of us could have predicted that we would be in the middle of a global pandemic, but the other pandemic that was existing, which was systemic racism.
Hi, Ber-Henda. I think we are having some internet issues.
And that lightning rod moment of George Floyd. And so from there, we had to take a critical look, a real critical look at our culture. And so as leaders, it is up to
Thank you for your patience, everyone. I think we are having a couple of Just a little bit of a technical difficulty with internet issues. So thank you for being patient with us. And as soon as we fix it, Ber-Henda will be back and we will be able to hear her.
Apologize for the technical difficulty. Yeah. Please bear with us with the technical.
We are problem solving and troubleshooting right now, so we should be back in just about a minute or two. Thank you for your continued patience. And of course, you know, we cannot predict internet, especially as many of us are going through various various climate issues, although Ber-Henda are not and I are not in a space that is like what is happening in Texas right now, but we do have snow and we do have a little bit of weather-related issues happening here, which is interfering with our network service. And so thank you for your patience, and we do apologize for these technical difficulties that we did not foresee. So thank you again.
Okay, I'm hoping that this is better. All right, I hope that this is better. I do apologize. It makes it difficult, so I hope that this is moving better. And so, as I was stating, we were in this lightning rod moment in our country where we had to face some really difficult truths about how we've been operating and how we've been being in the world. And systemic racism is an illness that has been pervasive for centuries and, in fact, built the country. So, with that, our leadership is going to have to dig deeper and go to a more soulful place. It's going to require us to move into a space of humility. And so we have heard about cultural competence, but this is now a space for cultural humility. And so wherever it is that we are in our environments, we're going to have to look at ways and really bring humanity in how we lead the whole person. Talk about intersectionality, the brilliant of Kimberly Crenshaw, right? Who coined the phrase intersectionality. We all come into this existence and into our workplaces, into our practices, um, with multiple identities. None of us are monolithic. And in order for us to heal and to really create that shift, that paradigm shift that we're aspiring toward, we have to look at the whole person. And in looking at the whole person, we have to do some deep witnessing. So that's part of the empathetic leadership, is looking at the whole person. And then what we're looking to sharpen even more is empathic listening. So we probably have participated in listening exercises. We love listening to our podcasts, but what we're listening for is not what's being said. Listening for is what's not being said. So we're looking at listening to body language, but also we're listening for an opportunity way for those that we have been called to serve. And so now in this pandemic space that we're in, leadership is going to require a total care, again, for the whole person. So being very keen to the life cycles of those around us. So what do I mean by life cycles? So we are in a space where many are caregivers. And so we're caregivers for elderly or aging parents. We are navigating a lot of loss. We're also navigating, and I love that we're having more conversations about complex trauma. So now, as leaders, it is up to us to create space for taking on and centering wellness. As an empathetic leader, you create a space, yes, for the whole person. You're creating space by being a really adept listener, but you are also taking on space for understanding where a person is in their life cycle. And so I see that, unfortunately, our internet connection here is still not working. So give me just a moment here. I'm hoping that this will work for us. So, oh, my apologies. I'm so sorry. So I'm so sorry that this is
This is AJ, and once again, I apologize for the technical difficulties from your convenience, and Ber-Henda is back.
Okay, this working a little bit better. I think, okay, fantastic. All right, everybody. So I think we are now able to continue with this presentation. Awesome. So as I was saying about empathic leadership, so the empathic leadership, again, takes into consideration the whole person. And so when we talk about the whole person, it's everything that they come with, all of their identities, everything without filter. And as we move into this new paradigm, we're also looking at people who are navigating both the space of being not just what their traditional roles may have been in a home, but also now teacher, as caregiver. And so the wellness movement that I'm so glad that we're in, because we've had so many conversations about trauma and complex trauma. We have layers upon layers within our culture, of a culture that rewards in rugged individuality, that rewards high achievement, overachievement. And it's not that we want to settle into mediocrity, but we have to give way to our humanness. And if we're not giving way to our humanness, we see the breakdowns that we're seeing, where people are working in ways that are not overly healthy, and they're working in ways in which are totally taxing to the body and to the mind and to the spirit. So the new leadership is going to center us in more mindfulness practices. And so we're seeing a shift where we're having companies to bring in individuals to do meditation, to do breath work, to really work on the overall well-being of their staff and their employees, which is a great thing. In fact, here in Michigan, the new standards, the new Common Core standards, have social emotional development as part of the curriculum. So it is so important now that we're infusing our right into the curriculum, right into education, right? Right into our education, mindfulness practices that are going to help support the total growth and well-being of our students. But we also have to have this working with our adults, right? So the empathetic leadership is going to, again, center the whole person, do the deep listening that is required, and is also going to center mindfulness as a way of being. The empathic leader is also a leader that is a servant leader, right? So it's a leadership that inspires. It's this particular leadership when we're talking about the strategic plan, like the overall plan and how we're going to get things done. The empathetic leader is going to look at power dynamics. So it's a power dynamic of power with versus a power over. It's going to take a more collectivist approach to the work versus a totalitarian. There is one who will reserve the right, of course, as the final decision. But as we look at the empathic or empathetic leadership, it takes into consideration um, the culture as a whole and all of the stakeholders, and making sure that every voice is heard and that there is no issue that is too small or insignificant. This type of leadership is going to support sustainability, right? So the entire life cycle of, the onboarding process and to the aspiration of the employee or the contractor. So there are some examples of organizations who are doing this well. So what are those examples, B? Okay, I'm so glad you asked. So one of those examples is Mind Valley, founded by Vishen Lakhiani. If you are not familiar with Mind Valley, please check Mind Valley out. So he has an amazing talk called Happiness is the New Productivity. And what happens is he supports the employees. So let's even say an employee has an idea that they want to bring into fruition, and rather than leave the company, they figure out a way to incorporate that idea within the company so that one, it helps with retention. Two, it gives the employee some autonomy to be themselves, right? So it's really a culture that is cultivated around happiness. And that helps to, according to the theory, the happiness helps to increase productivity, right? So another organization that does this well is Zing Train or Zingerman's. And the whole visioning process, right? Where we start with the end in mind and work backward. And for some of us, that sort of more creative thinking, non-linear thinking can be difficult because there's no right or wrong in the abstract. But it is in the abstract that things become possible. So when we're in the visioning space, so empathic or empathetic leadership is going to take a stance of looking at new and creative ways of doing and being. And again, it's going to look at a life cycle of the contractor or the employee and look at their total growth and development and create a space where every voice is heard. And again, no issue is too small. And the visioning piece. So it's a shared vision, right? So this is going beyond just the mission and vision statement of your company or organization, because oftentimes what happens if the culture doesn't shift, you'll have a mission, right? You have a mission statement and you'll have this beautiful, eloquent mission, both the way it's expressed or the way it's exacted. If the culture doesn't shift, then it doesn't support the true nature of what that mission is. So we have to have that shifting in the culture in order for the mission to be realized and to be exacted. Because we have heard the very powerful, powerful words of Dr. King's speech of I Have a Dream. And it is in this very visionary tone that we hear it. But the only way that that vision can become a reality is if the heart shifts and the mind shifts, which then enables the culture to shift. And this is what we're talking about with empathic or empathetic leadership. We're talking about a leadership that is founded in the heart. And let's not be misconstrued. I'm not talking about just this syrupy, kumbaya, let's love everybody, and make things personal. But I do think that we can create spaces with this type of leadership that creates a rapport and a deeper intimacy and a deeper connection with one another. So here it is. We're in February. This is in the middle of Black History Month. And for many organizations, this is the only time of year in which Black lives and the Black experience is witnessed and celebrated. And when we look at these months, right? Black History Month, Women's History Month, LGBTQ plus, IA plus month, Hispanic Heritage Month, we have to move beyond just the month, that the life of the other becomes relevant. So in this type of leadership, the whole person and the lived experience are constantly valued, not just in a particular month, not a particular time of day, and not when issues arise, right? Because when we have that lightning rod moment, like we saw with the George Floyd lynching made public, there was a lot of scrambling to put metrics and put things in place to answer diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, if we take the time in the beginning, or take the time, wherever you are in your business or wherever you are in your organization, take inventory. Take deep inventory of those who are around you. Take deep inventory of your community and what, not just what those needs are, but who are they as people? And what are the contributions that they're making? And that's where the beauty is. That's truly where the beauty is in the witnessing of the power of the existence of those who are around us, and not waiting until there's an issue that arises to make a plan of action or to be just responsive to the issue. And it really breaks my heart right now that we are seeing um, an uptick in violence against Asian Americans. And there's an opportunity now to really do our inner work, but also recognize the lived experience and take action and create protocols so that we can mitigate harsh stereotypes that get perpetuated, these stories that get perpetuated, because there is something about the story, about the narrative. One of my favorite teachers, Adrienne Marie Brown, talks about this in Emergent Strategies. And so her theory, or the observation that she makes, theory is not the right word, the observation that she makes is that everything that we have right now is the product of someone's imagination. And taking it a step further, looking at the work of Elizabeth Lesser, who's the author of Cassandra Speaks, which looks at particularly how story, how narrative impacts women. So everything back from, maybe your days in Greek mythology and myth, looking at how these stories, right? Even the apple with Eve, eating the apple. So whether you're a religious person or not, that's not the point of it. But the point is that you've heard the story. But how do these stories reinforce narratives? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about not just hearing what is said, but hearing is what is not said. And the power, the sheer magnitude of storytelling and narrative is crucial to either dismantling a disruptive narrative, a hurtful and harmful narrative, or keeping it in place. And so sometimes that radio silence is exactly what keeps things in place. So an empathetic leader may also be a disruptor, maybe one who is up for the challenge, in charge of disrupting a malignant culture in a particular environment. And so doing something in a different way where, again, the power dynamic is shifted, where it's power shared and power with, having the courageous conversations, and again, the deep listening for not just what is said, but what is not said. So we have to then address a belief system on what lives matter and what lives don't. And so if we're going to get to a space of, in the leadership model, of where our corporate social responsibility resides, where our, of course, profit and the bottom line resides, we have to look at the means in which we are doing it. And companies and organizations who create a culture of happiness actually have higher retention rates, actually have more productive employees, and also then achieve the bottom line, right? But if the bottom line has to be people first, purpose, and then profit. And so when we layer our foundation that way, giving honor to the individual who keeps the organization alive and enlivened and moving forward, and allowing that, allowing people to fulfill a deep sense of purpose, right? It then does help drive the bottom line. And thinking of it in terms of even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top of that, the very, very top of the pyramid, after we get to food and shelter and, a love and belonging, really at the top is self-actualization. And we want to be in a space as leaders where we're allowing people around us to fully actualize, to live up to their fullest potential. But the only way that we can really do that is if we create spaces that are built on the pillars of empathy and compassion. And then that way we can really speak to and really be in integrity with equity, making sure that there is a place for people to belong and to have a sense of fulfillment within their work. It reminds me of the work of Audre Lorde, where she talks about the uses of the erotic. And I think that most of the time we think of it in a very shallow context of only being physically intimate, but it's more than that. It's deriving joy from one's work or deriving joy from one's existence. And it is important that as a leader, and especially as an empathetic leader, you're leading from a space of coherence, of the heart, and of the mind. And when we're leading from that coherent space, and when we're leading from that space of, again, taking into consideration the whole of a person, listening again for not what's being said, but what's not being said, and creating a spaciousness of mindfulness in our organizations and in our businesses, we then cultivate a shift that I believe collectively will shift an entire culture in a generation in which we're doing things. We have been quarantined for almost a year now. Almost a year. Can you believe that? That we've been quarantined for almost a year. And with that, there's emerged a need to become even more vigilant around how we treat one another and the spaciousness that we create for the mindfulness pieces, but also the cancel and call out culture that we live in. And as an empathetic leader, it is up to us to create a space that is also redemptive, right? And so if we create a space where we're aiming not for perfection, but we're aiming for authenticity. We're aiming not for strategic strategy, but a movement that, and being tactical, but coming from a place that is genuine, right? So it's not how we answer things in the times of crises, right? Because that's reactionary. Well, what are we doing to be proactive? And what are we doing to be active allies? And how can a workplace or a firm or boutique agency or wherever it is that you find yourself, especially in the nonprofit world, that can be a very interesting place to navigate because so much is done with so little, and it can provide or put us in a space of scarcity because we're always looking on how can we get to um, the next financial goal, how can we retain the employees that we have, how do we serve those that we have been charged to serve, and remember that we are human beings and not human doings. And that is the constant quandary of an empathic leader or empathetic leader, is always looking at how things affect the whole. And so when we think about this, there is a way in which we move, which is agile. We have to move with agility. And the world calls it agile, but it's really a more feminine way of being. But in the agile way of doing business, it allows for us to move in a space of visioning, as I mentioned before, and moves in a space where we get to hear from others, maybe perhaps in ways that we traditionally have not. So when we have those retreats and team meetings, and of course we're doing all of this all virtually, um, it would invite us as leaders to take it a step further, to do more personalized ways of communication. So, maybe it is a an email that goes around with a playlist for motivation, and maybe it is, beyond just an inspirational quote, but perhaps it is also an invitation, a deep invitation into becoming keenly aware of what's happening in our social spaces in terms of social justice work. So again, it's not the idea that we become political, although the personal is political. It's the idea of making sure that we are good stewards. And, my heart goes out to my family in Texas, and in the wake of the devastation that has happened there. It's a moral imperative for companies to really be involved in what is happening and in the lives of the community. So whether it is making sure that we're reaching out to the next generation of employees by having a stronger presence within our schools, and maybe it's perhaps also looking at natural disasters and devastations in our communities, because here's the thing: nonprofits cannot do all of the work. So what does it look like to make sure that we are invested in sustainable food? What does it look like to be invested in not just the not just the tech space, but how does this impact um, marginalized voices, and making sure that the gaps that have previously existed begin to diminish by taking direct action now, by being a space where internships are available, apprenticeships are available, and partnerships with companies, smaller companies, and with minority firms, that the distribution of wealth and opportunity, where those things really become a lot more accessible, and that there's an intentional building of coalition. So I just really want us to be mindful of who's at the table that we're sitting at and who's not. And the empathetic leader is going to be surveilling, looking at the landscape to see who is not there, right? And make that invitation to bring the other in closer into the fold. And so with intentionality, and that's really the other piece about an empathetic leader, is that everything is done with intention, right? So even things like making sure that things are accessible. And what does that mean? So taking the extra step to make sure that things are translated, that there's an interpreter present, that things are closed caption, that we use one's correct pronouns, that we, even in our address, make sure that it is more welcoming and inclusive, and setting acknowledgments. So it's definitely an exciting time that we're in right now, for sure. It's an exciting time that we're in right now because there's so much up for review. But I would say our guiding principle has to be this: what side of history do we want to be on? Do we want to be so married to the ways in which things have been done in the past that we can't open ourselves up for a new way of doing things here in the present, to create an inclusive and more loving future, right? So we can look at ways in which we can bring not just diverse talent, but bringing in the talent, but also creating the space so that the talent can flourish. Also creating the space and grace for ourselves to learn, to move from the seat of authority, right? Because under the old paradigm, it is leadership, it sits in this ivory tower and is all knowing and a bit distant from people. And it's this quote by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. I absolutely love this. And she says, those who are most often closest to the pain are furthest from the power. And like I said, it's not that nonprofits can do all of the work. What are ways that we can bake an ethos into our companies where we look at the corporate social responsibility, where we look at ways in which we can give back to the next generation, and that we can look at ways at looking at what is plaguing our society and make it better. We can be innovative right now. What is it? The necessity is the mother of invention. We have a place and space now where we can be more innovative. We have a place and space now where we can, no, we can't go back to the past, but we can definitely look and track our forward movement by being more intentional about the kind of spaces and leadership that we hold, and be more intentional about being curious. That's one of the things that I love, love, love. It was a quote about the true definition of genius. Genius is uninhibited curiosity. being in a state of always wanting to learn, always wanting to grow, and looking at the experience that we call life as class. And a leader is going to be in a spaciousness of constantly improving, and that is actually inspiring, because it's not about what I say, it's really about what I do. And it's really about what I do when I think no one is looking. So I just want us to, as I close, to be really mindful of how we interact with our employees, how we interact with those stakeholders within our organization. And even if you're a solopreneur, look at ways in which you bring in those who are there to support you in exacting your business, that it is fair and equitable. And how can you use a model of culture shifting in your business that enables marginalized voices to flourish? Because we're connected, right? We're all part of a whole. We're part of a greater ecosystem where our lives are really dependent on one another. And success, a truer definition of success, is not just what one makes or what you make, but what is available for the team and what is available for the whole. So my name is Ber-Henda Williams, and it has been such a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And again, my apologies for the technical difficulty. I feel like we're flowing more fluidly now. And I am just, again, so excited to be here and to celebrate Dr. AJ and this amazing summit and all of the voices that you're going to hear here today. It is absolutely extraordinary. And it's been my pleasure to be here. If you want to find out more information on my work and what I do, you can log onto my website, which is berhendawilliams.com. There's a hyphen in it, BER-HENDA Williams.com. I appreciate your time, and please reach out to me. I am on Instagram under Ber-Henda and on Facebook under Ber-Henda, and I would love to connect with you more deeply around this topic of what empathetic leadership looks like as we move forward in this new paradigm. And whatever it is that we emerge back into the world, it is my hope that we take into consideration what is not being said and cultivate a deeper listening, become a better witness of humanity, and accept everyone's intersection and what they bring in, because they do bring in a richness through their identity. And how can we make our society, our immediate communities better? And how are we giving back to the next generation to bring them into the fold and to make things more equitable and more accessible? And that is the way of the empathetic leader. Thank you so, so much. It's been my pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for that, Ber-Henda. And there are so many comments. So, we do have another session in 10 minutes, but if you can log into the stage on Hopin through the registration link that you got, you'll be able to see all of the comments and on stage. I'll read a couple before we head out. Coming from a place that is genuine, big facts from Dr. Brian Hotchkins, who's speaking later today. Corrales, who spoke yesterday, made a few comments. Awareness to narrative is so important. It can't just be about culture, because cultures change if it's not baked into the brand purpose statement. There must be penalties and consequences if lines are crossed. That's why it's critical that DEI efforts laser focus on the brand purpose statement. Closest to the pain should be closest to the power. Love that. Leslie said, yes, that's deep. And then Corrales said, thank you, Ber-Henda. That was awesome. So see, like, even after all of the technical difficulties that we faced initially, it was so mind-blowing and so powerful. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart for troubleshooting, fixing, and going with the flow, as you said. I think that's I can't think of a better modeling in the moment of empathetic leadership to meet the needs of the context and the situation from wherever you are, instead of expecting the situation to conform to who you are. And I think that is the definition of heartfelt, empathetic leadership. So thank you so much for that. You can contact Ber-Henda using her speaker profile on the Hopin page as well. Her information is there as well. And if not, just reach out to me and I'm happy to provide you with the information if you can't find it. With that, Ber-Henda, again, it's been such an honor, and thank you so much for taking the time. And we hope to see you on Clubhouse tonight. I do know you have another event, but at any point, if you can join us, please do, so you can join the conversation. And with that, for our audience, we will be back in just about 7 minutes with our next session with Pamela Bean on HBCUs versus predominantly white institutions. Let's talk about equity there.
Talk about it.
Right. So we hope to see you there, and we will be back in about 6 minutes now. With that, this session is closing down.
All right. Bye, Jay. Thank you, everybody.